Welcome back to another lesson in our Infrastructure as Code course, where we'll learn how to create our cloud infrastructure using Infrastructure as Code using Terraform or OpenTofu combined with Terragrunt. And in today's lesson, we'll learn about set up our environment. So to follow up on this course and create infrastructure on your own, certain tools will have to be installed. Certain applications will have to be installed. For example, Terraform or OpenTofu will have to be installed for Infrastructure as Code, for a tool that can create infrastructure by reading code that you write. So for that, we're going to need to install Terraform or OpenTofu. We combine this with a tool like Terragrunt to have best practices, to avoid dry violation, to split our infrastructure to smaller units, smaller stacks, to different states. We combine Terragrunt, but Terragrunt needs to be installed as well. Other tools, perhaps pre-commit or kube control, so other tools need to be installed as well. So when you work on infrastructure, you have to install certain tools. Now, usually in this course, we're trying to learn best practice and this is an advanced course about infrastructure, and usually you want to work with a team or keep your option open to work with a team. And in that case, all the team need to install that environment. But it's best that all the team developers will have the same environment with the same tools, with the same versions. And to do this, we have to declare our environment declaratively. So for this, we'll learn how to set up an environment for Infrastructure as Code in a professional way, an environment in a declarative way using the tool called mise. So in this lesson, we will learn how to set up mise to install our Infrastructure as Code development environment. So as we mentioned, when creating Infrastructure as Code, certain tools, certain applications have to be installed. In our case, our Infrastructure as Code course is using Terraform or OpenTofu combined with Terragrunt. So for our use case, our course, certain tools will have to be installed. Tools like we're going to use pre-commit. We are going to use pre-commit as something that can run certain tasks as a Git hook. We're going to use Terragrunt. We're going to use OpenTofu, but of course you can also use Terraform if you want, but in this course we are aligned with open source MIT licensed tools, so we have to use OpenTofu, Terragrunt pre-commit. We cannot use Terraform, but the same code can run also with Terraform. So feel free to, instead of use OpenTofu, install Terraform as well. And we're going to use kube control. And those are tools we need to install in order to work our Infrastructure as Code project. Now, our best practice recommendation is to define your development environment declaratively. This means that your development environment needs to be specified in a configuration file. It needs to be applied, that development environments need to be applied to all the developers that are working on the Infrastructure as Code project. Don't just install tools. You need to use something to define your development environment declaratively. And as we mentioned in this course, we are going to use mise to define our development environment. Now, why is it important to declare your development environment, to have a declarative development environment and not just, we simply could install the tools that we mentioned like OpenTofu and Terragrunt and just start working. So the question is, why do we have to take that extra step to define our development environment instead of just jumping ahead, installing all the necessary tools and start coding? So reasons why your development environment should be declarative. First of all, easy installation. So at first you need to take that extra step, but everyone that is going to join your project will have a very easy installation process. We're going to use mise, so everybody that is going to join the project, all they have to do is install mise and then run mise install, one command to install all the tools that is needed for Infrastructure as Code. So it's easy installation. Although you do that extra step, in the future, everyone that wants to install the tools, it's a really easy process. Declarative environment ensures that all developers have all the tools installed. So a new developer is joining the team, he's running mise install. We know for sure that all the development tools that he needs are going to be installed. It ensures the version of the tools. So this is also very important. I don't want new developers to just install all the tools. It's important that all developers will work with the same version of the tools, because a developer cannot develop new feature with an advanced OpenTofu or Terraform version that is not supported by the entire team. Also, usually you combine continuous integration, continuous development. He cannot develop in a certain version that is not supported by the continuous integration, continuous deployment, sorry. So the tool's version needs to be aligned with all the team and the CI, otherwise it can create problems during development. It ensures no additional or wrong tools are installed. So it ensures that what you install is what declared in your environment and not extra tools or wrong tools. A new developer can we can say that a new developer needs to install a certain tool. So we might go and install that tool on his own, and it might take it from a bad place. So in security term, it's very important that the tools will be taken from a secured place with checksum and security checks that everything is installed from the proper location and you're grabbing the proper file. So from security aspect, this is also important. No additional, no wrong tools. Wrong tools can also be a developer can start developing in Terraform while all the team is using OpenTofu. So I saw that happen as well. So this is also a wrong tool. When you have the environment specified, you don't have those kind of mistakes. Security, as we talked about, if you let developers install the environment on their own, they might take it from wrong place. They might install bad software. They might have security breaches. So it really protects you also that the origin of the tools that are used in development, the origin is safe. And also CI/CD alignment. If you develop something, for example, we talked about the versions of the tools. The CI needs to run the same version, otherwise you might develop something and you find that you crash your CI/CD because the version that runs there is different. So your CI/CD need to be aligned in terms of tools and in terms of version. So this is why it's so important to have your declarative development environment. And what we're going to do is use a tool called mise, or the full name is mise.toml, which is a French term. I hope I'm not butchering. Sorry about that bad French accent, but it's come from a cooking term. It's like preparing before you cook, preparing your ingredients, cutting the vegetables so you can focus on the cooking. So it's a good name because it's like preparing your development environment before starting to develop. So mise.toml is preparing your cooking ingredients. It's a cooking term, preparing every ingredients and cutting and everything you need for the cooking process itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to use mise to define our development environment in a declarative fashion. Before we continue declaring our development environment using mise, I just want to remind you that this entire lesson is available online at the Academeez site. I'll place the link in the description. You'll find there a step-by-step guide, completely free. And just a reminder what Academeez is, so just 1 minute of your time, I want to explain why Academeez was born. So sometimes education and money are not going in the same direction. So sometimes they are, and sometimes education goes one way and revenue and money goes the other way. And usually when they fork, when they go different ways, the one that is damaged, the one that's going to reduce in quality is the education part, not the revenue. Now, how can you tell if a platform wants your money? Easy, you go to the platform and suddenly the platform will want you to register. In Academeez, we don't want you to register. Everything is free. You can just click the link and you'll see the video, you'll see tutorials, you'll see live code editors that you can place code and see the result. Everything is completely free. You don't have to register. Academeez is not based on revenue, rather it's based on better education. So sometimes education and money do not go the same way, and this damages the education part. So I can tell you a personal story about myself. I started Academeez because I didn't have courses, I didn't have learning material, good learning material online, and the only way I felt was a way for me to improve my knowledge is to create courses for advanced developers. Because when you go to courses for advanced developers, you have to have a practical experience. You have to actually write code. You have to manage teams. You have to manage products. It's not enough to just read the documentation and do like a small tutorial, hello world. It's something advanced. You have to know the advantages, the disadvantages of the technology. And for me, the way to advance is not only to touch on the practical side, is to teach advanced developers. This way, I need to read the entire documentation. I need to examine code bases. Those are my main education, my main tools for advancing myself. And those are not courses. I can't find courses or good material, and I'm sure that the market of online courses, not a lot of advanced developers are going and buying online courses, because the online courses are usually for beginners. They're usually, you don't know if the stuff you will learn are actually practical when you start a big project with a large team. You don't know if the knowledge will actually make is actually something you are going to use. You highly question the quality of the knowledge that is passed in an online course when you have advanced experience. So sometimes education and money goes hand in and not in the same direction, and you feel it, especially when you gain advanced level of experience. You feel that. You start to see that you lack the courses that match for you, and your resources get limited, and you find yourself, Stack Overflow is not relevant. You find yourself going to code bases and formal documentation as your main guide. So there are times when education and money do not go hand in hand. Those results, some example of the result of this kind of education and money not going in the same direction. The result of this in the programming world, for example, is clickbaits. React is dead, front end is dead. No, React is not dead. No, front end is not dead. It's something that, nice title for you to click, and usually advanced developers don't click that. Beginners click that and they get wrong misinformation, and it might affect their future because they might get influenced from those clickbaits. Beginner courses, and the beginner courses I know because I used to supervise on instructors in beginner courses. A lot of the times, the instructors were not that experienced. They only learned how to create a shopping cart, how to create something very simple, and how to teach simple stuff in the course. But after you see students are asking them questions that they are not ready, you see bad answer. You actually see that there is no practical experience. So there is also lack of depth in the course. So we see beginner courses that are creating a to-do list or a shopping cart without actually explaining what is behind the technology. It's not important. It's more important for the student to create his own personal project than to follow with the instructor copying the exact same line as the instructor made. It's more important to take the depth and try to throw it on your own project than just create a shopping cart copying what the instructor is doing. And that lack of depth is something that you see in the beginner courses, something that pushes beginner developers to a certain wrong direction. Inexperienced teachers, as I mentioned, in order to teach a technology, you have to have not 1 week, not 1 month of experience, but actually years of experience that are in actual projects that are released to production, that you have maybe a lot of teams, a lot of developers working on that project. When you have those kind of projects, certain problems start to rise, and the depth that you have to sink in the technology is much greater. When most of the time I spend on coding and managing teams of developers. I do not teach most of the time. It's something I do to improve my knowledge. And the depth goes from that experience. So a lot of teachers dedicate themselves to teaching, and their level of expertise is limited to small projects. And you see it in very superficial courses. You see it in a lot of courses. Suddenly one teacher is experienced in all the technologies that are available. You see the lack of experience, especially if you're an advanced developer that examining those instructors, you can see it right away. So you have inexperienced teachers that can teach that course. So basically everyone can be suddenly a React, a front-end teacher, an infrastructure as code teacher. They only need to learn the basics, and they create a basic course. So no, that's not the direction. The direction needs to be with depth, with understanding, with understanding what's behind the technology, and not just creating something simple. Lack of advanced resources. So as I mentioned, for me, this academeez was a project for me to improve my knowledge because I had lack of advanced resources. So it forces me, Academeez forces me when I'm creating this course to dig deep, have a depth, read the entire documentation, go to a lot of code bases, and obviously work with the technology that I'm teaching for years and managing teams. And I will never teach something that I have only 1 year of experience that I just did a small project. I will only teach stuff that I have a lot of experience. So again, this is just to mention what Academeez was born for. So what I'm trying to say here, that Academeez would appreciate your support. So it's not a donation, it's not money, everything is free, everything is MIT licensed, but we would really appreciate if you, since it's open source, since I want to attract other experienced developer to the cause of creating highly advanced teaching resources, I would appreciate if you go to the GitHub link and just click the star here to start our efforts, and that would mean a lot. Thank you. So now let's continue with the lesson. So continuing our lesson and creating our development environment using Mise, let's start by first talking what is Mise. So Mise helps you define your development environment in a declarative way. You basically, in your project, in your root project, you create a file called mise.toml. This is a configuration file that Mise uses to know exactly what your development environment should look like. And in this configuration files, you have stuff like the apps that you need to install. If you're on a Node project, it could be Node. If you're a Python project, it could be Python. If you're an infrastructure as code project, it could be your infrastructure as code tools. In our case, we can specify there that we want to install OpenTofu and Terragrunt. So that file contains configuration and information about your environment that Mise can process and create your environment. So define the apps inside the mise.toml. We define the apps that we want to install, and we define the versions of those apps. We can configure in that mise.toml file, we can configure environment variables. So you can automatically adjust the environment variables that should be in your environment, and you can specify it in the mise.toml. You can define certain tasks. So you can say, I want a task that will format my YAML files. You can define a certain task for maybe output a plan, or certain task that you want. You can define inside the mise.toml certain tasks that you need to alias and rerun often. And every developer that's going to the project and sees mise.toml file can install all the tools that are specified in that mise.toml by simply running one command, mise install. What we'll do now is we'll start by installing Mise. So before we start configuring our environment, let's start with installing Mise, and then we will start using Mise to configure our development environment. So we'll start by installing Mise, and I'm not going to show you how to install Mise because this is pretty stupid, because everybody has a different operating system. One is Windows, one is Mac. Plus, there is a better explanation in the documentation, so I'm not going to trouble you of how I installed Mise in my own computer. Rather, I will place a link in the description, or you can check in the Academeez guide, and they will direct you to Mise documentation where they have an installation guide. So use that installation guide to install Mise. There is a few things you need to do. One is install Mise CLI, which is basically it's one curl command, or you can use Homebrew or Windows, whatever Windows is using. So you do the install Mise CLI, this is step one. And another thing that I recommend that you do is you go down and you activate Mise automatically by appending something to your terminal script. Rather you use bash, then you'll have the bash RC file, or I'm using ZSH, so I appended it to my ZSH file. So just run this command that they give you to append at the end of the script automatic activation of Mise. And try to do it, stop the video, try to do it now, and after you finish installing Mise CLI and activating, you check that everything is installed by, you can do mise -- version to check the version. And you can do also mise doctor, and you should see I have a few warnings. A new mise, and I have that a new mise, basically a new mise is available. That's the warning I'm getting. So I'll do this update installation. Let's try this. Mise warn to update run mise self-update. Let's run mise self-update. Mise self-update. The new release, current release, the new release will be download. I approve that. I'm downloading, updating mise, and okay, so I updated mise. Now I'll do mise doctor again, and no problems found. So after you install, verify that you install using mise version and mise doctor. So you need to install the CLI and activate it in the bash. And if everything in this installation is correctly, you run mise doctor and you should see no problems found. So now that we install mise, let's show a simple mise demo. Before we start focusing on our own environment, I want to show a small demo just for you to understand what exactly is mise doing. So just a general demo, and then we'll dive into creating our development environment for our infrastructure as code project. But for now, let's go to the terminal. We installed mise, so we saw that mise doctor had no problems. Now, let's say I'm creating a dir directory. Let's say we name this directory project A. Now, inside project A, I want to run a certain version of Node. And I'm going to create also project B. So I created two directories, project A and project B. So let's go to project A. And let's say in project A, I want to use a certain node version. And in project B, I want to use a different node version. So let's go to node website. And let's say one project A is using the latest long-term support, 24.11.1. And the other project B, is using the latest release, which we don't recommend using in production. It's better to use the LTS, but project B likes to live on the edge and likes to try beta versions. So project B is using the latest release. So let's go to project A. I CD'd into project A. Now I can do mise use node version. In this project, I want to use version 24.11.1. So mise use node 24.11.1. And let's do node -v. And now I'm working with the node version, not the right. I'm not judging if you use a different version, but I'm using the LTS version in project A. Now let's go to project B. Project B, if I do a node -v, I see a different node version. I can do a mise use node and try a different version, 25.2.1. 25.2.1. And now if I do, it's installing. Let's give it a second. And now if I'm doing node -v, I'm in a different version. Now notice that if I see the files in this directory, as well if I did the same in project A directory, I would notice that I have a new file created called mise.toml. Let's print that mise.toml file, and I see that all it contained is tools, node, and the version of node. And same goes for the other directory. So now I'm in this directory. I'm using 25.2.1. Let's cd back to project A, node -v, without doing anything, because we automatically activated mise, right? Mise, we added the activation of mise inside our bash initialization script. Rather it's .bashrc or .zshrc, and it's activated automatically. You just switch from a different directory and mise loads the environment of that project automatically, which is pretty cool. And mise has other options, but this is just a general demo of what mise is doing. Mise is creating a mise.toml. By the way, project A, if I look at the files, has also a mise.toml, and I can cut mise.toml just to print its content to see tools, node, and a different version. So what mise is doing, it's allowing us to create a configuration file for a folder that describes the environment in that folder. when I'm cding into that folder, automatically Mise is creating the proper environment that is needed for that project. So pretty cool, right? So think about it, if you're in a project with a team of developers, how handy that is, that all the developers are in the same development environment. So we have similar tools like NVM, but it's very limited. NVM is for node, different node versions, for example. You have also for Python, I think it's venv, so for virtual Python environment. But those are very limited and very limited in the fact that they're allowing you a single tool. Mise is much more powerful, that it allows you multiple tools and allows you tasks and allows you environment variable. So it's a bit more powerful than those tools. You have also a tool called ASDF, which Mise is inspired from ASDF. So that's also a good tool, which is going to remake with Go. So it's became faster. The problem with that tool that before the remake, it was created by Bash and it was pretty slow. So I think Mise is created with Rust. So this is another good tool, but make sure to go to the new version that's created with Go. But basically Mise is a bit more powerful than those venv or NVM. So it is recommended, it's highly recommended to use Mise, and this is the tool we're going to use for our infrastructure as code project. So we're about to create our environment, so let's just specify how our environment looks like. And by the way, our environment might change. So this environment is something that we're going to start from, but as we move along this course, we might add more tools, more tasks, but it's a good starting point. It doesn't mean that it's carved in stone. We might change our environment, maybe add more tools, more tasks as the course goes along. But we still are going to use Mise if we're going to add certain things later on. So let's talk about our environments that from the starting point, what our environment will contain. So first of all, we're going to install pre-commit to install certain hooks that are activated on Git hooks. We are going to install OpenTofu, we are going to install Terragrunt, and we are going to install kubectl. And the configurations that we're going to use, Mise is used also for configuration. So for example, I can configure environment variables and tasks and versions and checksums and etc. So let's talk about the configuration that we'll have. And again, we might change this file, add more things as the course moves along. So we're going to have fixed versions for consistency. So every tool we're going to install will have a fixed version. And we're going to use the version that today are the latest. So we're going to start with the latest, and we might also update as we move along the course. We might decide to update and increase those versions. So just that we specify the version now does not mean that in a month from now we won't update the tools for newer versions. We are going to also, part of the configuration, we're going to verify the sources. So I want to install those tools from verified sources and not just random sources which might cause security breach. I want to define everything, all the configuration inside a mise.toml file, and I want also to create a file called mise.lock, which specify the sources and checksum and is good for security. So I'm going to activate also for this to create an exact snapshot of the tools and the version from where they're taken and the checksum. So I know all the developers that are using this environment, their tools are installed properly with the right version from the right location. Great, so let's start creating our environment. So I opened my IDE in our project folder, and what we're going to do is we are going to generate a new file that's called mise.toml. This is the Mise configuration file. We also want to create Mise to update a mise.lock file. This will create all the tools, the version, the checksum, the origin, and it's like a reproducible snapshot of all the tools that we are going to install. For Mise to update the mise.lock file, which is a pretty new feature, we have to enable this feature in the settings. So we'll add settings, log file true, and also I need experimental true because for this feature to work, we also need to enable the experimental features. So that's it. Now I want to install the tools that we're going to use in this course. So I'm going to mise use, let's install OpenTofu. The newest version at the time of this recording is 1.10.7, so I'll use OpenTofu. And if I check my mise.toml, I should see OpenTofu with the version I specified, and I should see mise.lock as well, specifying the version and the backend that is used. I'm going to install also mise Terragrunt. At the time of the recording, the newest version is 0.93.13. We're going to use this, and we are going to mise use cube control, and we are going to also mise use pre-commit. So this is the tools we're going to use. The mise.lock is updated, the mise.toml is updated with those tools, and our environment is configured. So if I want to check if those tools are installed, I can do a tofu, let's say tofu version, to see the OpenTofu version, and I see it's 1.10.7. So every time you're going to cd, I'm going to cd into this project folder, automatically mise is going to make sure that all my tools are installed as well as running in the correct version. So this is mise then, and we created mise configuration file to make our infrastructure as code development environment, which is going to be identical for me as well as all the developers that are going to use this project. So after we configured our environment, let's talk about what happens if you just want to use the environment. So as we said, if you have a repository that contains a file mise.toml, like our course repository, the things you have to do is install and activate mise. As we talked about, you need to install the CLI, as well as we recommended automatically activating it in your ZSH or bash initialization script. So install and activate mise. You cd into the project directory where you have in the root of the project, you have a mise.toml. You review the mise.toml. You might need to run mise trust, otherwise mise will error out. So, but only run mise trust after you examine the mise.toml and it seems like a normal configuration. There is no weird tasks or weird tools that are downloaded from unknown locations. So after you examine the mise.toml, you can run mise trust, and then you can run mise install. So this is the steps that you need to take in order to use the mise configuration of our repository, in order to use the configuration that we are using in this course repository. So that's it for our lesson. We managed to configure our development environment using mise. So we learned how to create a declarative development environment with mise. Some key takeaways that you need to take from this is declarative. There are a lot of advantage for declarative environments, and when we're using mise, we basically define the mise configuration, mise.toml and mise.lock, and then mise can read those configuration and create our development environment for us. So mise manages environment declarative. Our environment is constructed for now. We might add more tools in the future. During the course development, we might add more tools, but for now, our environment consists of pre-commit, OpenTofu Terragrunt, and cube control. Reproducibility, we created a reproducible development environment. Every developer can now go to our repository. He sees a mise.toml, so he installs mise, he activates mise, and then he types mise install, and that's it. All the tools are installed. His computer is now configured for the development environment, and he can start writing code. This is much easier than looking for various locations and how to install different tools, and a lot of mess with the version. So everything is clean and organized, the right tools, the right version, the right security, because the tools are taken from the right place. We have a very easy setup for our environment now. All a developer needs to do is to run mise install. So it becomes really easy, and everything we have a contributing file in the repository where everything is written there, how to use mise and how to run mise install and how to create the development environment, which is extremely easy now that we're using mise. That's it. Thank you for listening. As a reminder, everything we talked about in this lesson, everything is the Academy site. Academy site, free, MIT license, open source, no need to register, no need to pay. just the content is there for free. But if you enjoy the content and you want to help us out, maybe fight clickbaits and bad lessons, bad courses, bad tutors in programming, so you can go ahead, click the GitHub link, star us on GitHub. That will be really helpful, and this is your way to say thank you for the content. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next lesson.